When I was 8 years old, I was really obsessed with this game called Adopt Me. Now, the entire premise of the game was to make money, buy eggs, and hatch and grow the animals that came out of those eggs. But, I was a little too obsessed, so I had a year-long streak of logging onto the game. And eventually, I earned this thing called a golden egg, and out of it hatched a little golden griffin. Oh my goodness, they had me working a 9-to-5 at 8 years old to keep this thing alive and well. But fast forward a few weeks after I got my golden griffin, my neighbor joined me in my game and asked to do a trust trade, which is when you and another person exchange really expensive items to prove that you trust each other. I think you can see where this is going. So she's just pleading on her knees for me to go through with this trust trade. And eventually I cave, I do the trade, and my heart sinks. Because as soon as the trade goes through, she immediately leaves the game. But, 8-year-old Avin doesn't panic too much, I mean business. So I walked right on over to her house to find out that her little brother had stolen her iPad and scammed me out of my golden griffin. 7 years later, I have never spoken to my neighbors ever again. So it's a little ironic for me to be standing up here with my speech titled, "Let Go," because clearly I have not let this go. But that is exactly why this topic is so important to discuss, because we all need to learn the importance of letting go of our minor mistakes and moving on. As you can see here in the title, let go, when translated into Farsi, my native language, becomes dast bardar. And so when I wanted to copy and paste this onto the slides, I had to go through Google Translate. But what was weird was that translating dast bardar from Farsi gave me the results give up in English. And that's another misconception that I want to talk about today. Too often nowadays, I've noticed that there's a really negative connotation surrounding the way we as humans perceive and respond to our insecurities, our flaws, our mistakes. Even if it is the smallest of things, we have become masters at compiling our minor faults into a barrier so high that we can no longer see the light on the other side of that barrier. We can no longer grow and appreciate the achievements that we've made. I'm guilty of this myself. There's been so many times where I sit down to worry about a test, and then I think, oh, but I have this project due soon too, and I'm really involved in speech and debate, so I'll say, oh, I also have to write my speech for this weekend. And then 30 minutes later, you'll find me crying about something completely unrelated, like the way I look or how I don't want to grow up. In Farsi, we call this as kah kuh sakhtan, which literally means making mountains out of dirt. And it's an idiom to describe the human tendency to make a tiny problem much larger than it really is. And so, since this predisposition is so normalized in human nature, whenever someone tries to break out of that constant cycle of hate and guilt and deprecation, instead of being faced with bravery, they are belittled, they are torn down, and they are told that not being perfect means they're giving up. This is the sentiment that I stand before you to disprove tonight. Perfection should never be the goal because life is imperfect. Life is filled with so many faults and errors, but that doesn't mean it's not worthy of appreciation, just like us. That is why the most important step to personal growth is understanding that you are capable of more and achieving and appreciating yourself and your efforts. But obviously, this is much easier said than done, which is why today I want to highlight 3 key factors that can help us get there. First is recognizing the small, day-to-day things that have a positive impact on your mental health and your life overall. Second is changing your perspective on imperfection and what exactly dictates success. And third is learning how to move on. So, chapter 1, the small things. Earlier this year, in January, I sent out a questionnaire to over 200 people to gather data for this portion of my speech. And the first question that I asked participants in this questionnaire was, what is a small thing that always makes you feel better and that you really appreciate? For a lot of people, their small thing was keepsakes, whether it be stuffed animals, music, or pictures from times in their life where they were the happiest and the most innocent. Looking back on these things whenever we feel worthless reminds us of the joy and love that we are capable of even when we're at our worst. Another thing that I hold very close to my heart and saw that others do too is appreciation from others. Of course, this is a very two-sided street, since becoming dependent on this appreciation can absolutely damage your self-esteem by making you feel like you're only as good as others perceive you. However, every once in a while, acts of kindness such as positive body language, empathetic comments, and handmade gifts are things that make us feel true gratitude. That is why I urge you all to keep these letters and gifts somewhere in your sight, because they are physical reminders that there are people out there who are appreciating our efforts and supporting us even when we can't do the same for ourselves. The fact that someone took the time out of their day to recognize us personally proves to us that our biggest accomplishment is that there is only one of us in this world, and we have to acknowledge that and use that power to its fullest potential. Now, last but not least, the last small thing that I want to talk about today is the importance of taking the time to do things for yourself. A few weeks ago, I had a very necessary call with one of my friends, Ava. And at the beginning of the call, I was piling problems again. Like, oh, I have this to do and this and that, and I am just so stressed. And she asked me, she said, Avin, do you feel like yourself right now? And I feel like that is a question that we all need to ask each other, because normally I pride myself on being such a positive, productive, uplifting person. And even at that moment, my stress was because of the wonderful opportunities that I have been given, which is why I felt so guilty admitting that, no, I didn't feel like myself having to handle that workload. And that is exactly when I realized that you could be getting all of your work done and pursuing all these wonderful opportunities. But if you are losing time in a day to do the things that you genuinely love to do, then your schedule isn't productive, it's destructive. Because we cannot expect ourselves to do our best if we are not at our best. That is why I loved the survey responses where people said a small thing that helped them was taking a walk, cleaning their workspace, and spending time with their loved ones. In fact, a study done by researchers on a group of medical professionals at the Isfahan University of Medical Sciences proved that there is a direct link between socialization and productivity. Increased sociability leads to dedication to one's task or work, which in turn increases our productivity and rate of success. This is yet another piece of evidence proving that in order to fulfill a task, we have to feel fulfilled first. But for a lot of people, the biggest obstacle in place of them being able to actually appreciate themselves and their efforts are insecurities. Back to that questionnaire that I sent out in January. The second question I asked participants was about their thoughts on the role of confidence in facing insecurities. But before we can go over their responses, let's first establish what an insecurity is. The biggest takeaway that I want you all to take away from this speech today is that insecurities are not real. They are inflated fears and self-doubts that our mind has created to make us more vulnerable in a given situation. But how do we exactly get out of that vulnerable state? Well, the first thing we can do is apply what we learned in step 1, which is to appreciate the small things. Let's build an analogy. If I showed you this image, you wouldn't even be able to tell what it was until I zoomed out again. Similarly, in a picture of yourself, zooming in on your insecurities only shows a distorted, inaccurate representation of who you truly are. Instead, in order to see our true selves and appreciate who we are, what we need to do is zoom out and see the bigger picture. What that means is appreciating our smile and joy even if we don't like the way our teeth look, or appreciating the outfit that we selected that day even if we think our arms look too big in it. This is confidence, the ability to love yourself and all of your flaws because you know that you are so incredibly worthy of this love and respect. And if you don't know that, then I'm telling you right now that you absolutely are worthy of these things. The second thing that we can do is change our perspective on what exactly success is. Right now, the most accomplishing achievement for a human is to achieve success. We love winning, and the more that we're able to do that, the better the state of our mental health, which we've already gone over, has a huge positive impact on our productivity. But unfortunately, we can't beat every competitor, and we can't come first place at every competition. But instead of beating ourselves up over that, if we just change our definition of success from winning to experiencing, then suddenly everything becomes a win. And you know what else? Since mistakes are arguably the most important part to experiencing, then changing our definition of success directly changes our perspective on imperfections as well. Concurrently, if we take the same amount of time that we do right now dwelling on our little mistakes and instead used it to appreciate these little achievements, we would be much happier people. The last step in this 4-step process is to actually embrace your imperfections and understand that they are what make you human. And once you can do that, you can realize how insignificant these tiny mistakes are when compared to the surplus of success that you've experienced in your life. But all of this has been prep work leading up to the entire point of my speech here today, learning how to let go of our little mistakes and move on to experience the beauties of life. What we fail to realize is that every morning that we wake up, we have the chance to change our lives for the better. But what this doesn't mean is trying to fix every tiny mistake in the past. This doesn't mean biting off more than we can chew to try to prove a point. And this certainly doesn't mean pursuing things for an application or for the validation of others after failing to do something for ourselves. The only way that we can move on, enhance our lives, and grow as people is by understanding ourselves and our goals. The reason why so many people fail at achieving their dreams is because they try to be someone who they're not, because they have been fed the aspirations of others for so long that they no longer know what they truly want. A quote that I've heard very often is that nothing changes if nothing changes. And what this means is that if you cannot stop living a life for other people, you will never be able to break out of the constant cycle of guilt for your imperfections and unpreparedness. I'm Middle Eastern. Trust me, I know what it's like to have your future laid out for you by other people. But breaking free from these expectations is the only thing that will allow you to actually realize that you are destined for more. And when I say that, I mean that you are destined to do whatever you want to do, not what others want for you. So today, I urge all of you, just like in Adopt Me, to break free from the shell of limitations that imperfection and insecurity have built around you, and hatch and grow into a confident, new version of yourself. You'll know once you've reached that point, when you can make a mistake, successfully let go, and move on to be proud of yourself and show the world just how far you've come. Thank you.